All right, everybody, as promised, this is my inaugural launch into my new podcast called the Intentional Wellbeing Podcast. And I have a very special treat for everyone today. I've invited my very own psychotherapist, counselor friend to be the inaugural, the very first person launching this intentional well-being podcast. And I'd like to welcome to the podcast Meghan Watson. Hey, girl. Hey.
Yay! I'm so glad to be here. I
Thank
mean, we get to see each other professionally because of the work that we do, but it is just so lovely to see you shine and to see all of the work that you're doing, uplifting the community and really just teaching people about how to be well. It's really inspiring. I'm humbled. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to have found you in my life. We started talking kind of just really casually over Instagram. I think I was
Mm-hmm.
over Instagram, and
Mm-hmm.
then I had noticed that you were local to me, meaning that you were in Canada and in the province that I reside in, not necessarily like down the street. And I had been wanting to come back to therapy for quite some time. I've been in therapy on and off since my early 20s. I would say
Mm-hmm.
my late teens, early 20s. And I find that it's been this incredible place for me to unpack my feelings, for me to get context around, my past in order to inform
Mm.
my future. It's helped me in my marriage. I've been to marriage counseling. I really believe in therapy, and I know that that's not always the case for people who look like us. Like therapy, sometimes
Yep.
um, is actually looked down upon, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the podcast. But before we go anywhere, I'm asking everybody this question on the podcast to you. What is the difference between wellness and well-being?
That is such a great question. And, thinking about that really makes me want to delineate between wellness is a practice, well being is a state. And well being is how you feel, but wellness is what you do. And
Mm,
so wellness and well-being are super subjective. One person's ideal state of being and one person's wellness practice might be torture to another person, right?
mhm.
And one person's way of showing up in their life and what that means for them in terms of their wellness practice and what it means to be well might be another person's idea of a really bad time. So I think, thinking about wellness and well-being they're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Wellness is really, the practice, the commitment, the doing, and well-being is the feeling, the experiencing, the state of mind, and state of body and state of spirit that you reach when you commit to and you focus on those wellness practices.
I love that. Wow. I've really been wrestling with those two things because when I was thinking about naming this podcast and what it was I wanted to dive into, I had this kind of friction, or I got stuck in the idea of wellness because I've noticed in the world today, wellness has really been a practice that we see primarily white folks
Mm-hmm.
have access to, right? So that when I talk about self-care, in the beginning of this whole reimagining self-care for ourselves, there was a lot of this, well, I go for a massage, or I go get my nails done, or, I'm going on vacation, or I'm taking a yoga retreat. And I think that's wonderful. These are all
Mm-hmm.
wellness practices. Well, what if you don't have access to any of those things? So, what does
Right.
wellness look like if you don't have a lot of disposable income, or if you don't have access to these things that you want to do? And so I started preaching the idea of wellness or well-being being individual things that you can do for yourself that are just everyday events that relieve stress in your life. So that's my self-care, I guess, definition for people. So today
Right.
I went grocery shopping. I don't really like grocery shopping. And lately it hurts my feelings because everything in the grocery store is more expensive due to inflation and the pandemic and all those things. So
Yep.
my car, I took a picture, I haven't posted it, but I took a picture of my trunk with my groceries and I go, self-care day 101 on Monday. This is intentional self-care, but it's not necessarily joyful self-care. So there are these two things in my mind where, okay, I'm being intentional about this because I need to eat, I need to feed my family, and this is part of our self-care routine, and it's intentional. But I would have way more joy standing on my grass with my shoes off, maybe looking at my garden. So that to me is like enjoyable self-care. And this is intentional self-care, something I have to do that's going to provide me less stress later on, but something I don't really like doing.
I love the use of the word intentional because I think, I've said this before, but intention creates space.
Mm,
Intention drives purpose. And so when we want to be intentional about something, we need to be mindful of it. But mindfulness does not preclude joy, acceptance, agreeableness. It just means knowledge, right? And
mm,
so
mm,
I think becoming more aware and becoming more intentional and purpose driven in our wellness is really important. But, touching on that self-care piece, self-care is a huge part of wellness, but I think wellness can even be fulfilling relationships with your loved ones.
mm,
Wellness can be, you know, um, living in a safe and comfortable environment,
mm,
making sure that, you have a roof over your head or at least someone that you trust to
mm,
talk about, the hard things in your life. And so I think self-care is underneath the wellness umbrella, but I think for a lot of people, you're right. Self-care is inaccessible because we've tacked it on to capitalism.
yeah.
And, when we put self-care as this thing you need to buy or this thing that is connected to access and privilege and power, it becomes looped into this very supremacist notion of who gets to access wellness, who gets to
Mm,
be well, and who
mhm,
deserves it.
mhm.
And that's problematic for a lot of reasons. But, you're right. Self care can be super simple. I think of self care as daily hygiene,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Did you balance your budget this month? Did you prepare your tax documents? Have you cleaned out the fridge? You know?
Those all of those things I just stuck my tongue out are intentional. You know what I mean? Cleaning out the fridge is not on my list of things I love to do, but yeah, but they are self-care things. I often talk about brushing and flossing your teeth. That was one
Yep.
self-care or well-being habit that I took on during the pandemic. Is my excuse prior to the pandemic was I don't have time to floss my teeth. I can, I got to get to bed or I got to get where I'm going or whatever. And then I thought, now I'm not actually going anywhere except downstairs to flip on my computer. So I can take the extra 30 seconds or a minute. And that's all it is. It's like a minute to floss your teeth. And I always thought to myself, I made a big deal about nothing and it's going to help me keep my teeth. It's almost like putting that well-being or that wellness in the bank for a future withdrawal, right? I think about that
Yes.
when I'm running,
Love that.
right? This is just a new thing that's been ruminating in my head when I'm running and I'm not having a particularly fun time. Like sometimes I'm out there and I'm living my best life, and other times I'm out there, I'm like, why do I do this? Like, why am I doing this? And then I hear that little voice in our head saying, I have a history, my family has a history of heart disease and diabetes and cancer and all the things. And these are little wellness or well-being or self-care that I'm putting in the bank for later. So that if I take
Mhm.
care of my heart now, even if I do get heart disease, maybe it'll be minimized. Maybe it won't be as, pronounced or
Mhm.
as, serious as if I didn't do any of this at all. So I actually
Mhm.
look at it, I look at intentional movement or intentional self-care, things I don't always love to do, but will lead to a better outcome later as banking this practice for later.
I think it's really hard to do that for a lot of people because activities of daily living can be so burdensome
Mm,
when the the reasons why you need to do them are rooted in burnout,
Mhm.
stress,
Yeah.
and like intergenerational, like unwell, like feeling
Trauma.
intergenerational effects of being unwell, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, my
Yeah.
father has chronic health conditions. My grandfather had chronic health conditions. And, you know, it's a huge piece of, you know, at least Caribbean culture. I know
Yep.
Barbados is a huge place where I'm from, where we have, it's like the diabetes, one of the diabetes capitals of the world. And so,
Yeah.
in many ways, you know, caring for our health is like a public health issue,
Yeah.
as well as, you know, navigating, you know, is this the is this way of showing up for myself, this small decision that I can make today, you know, meaningful for me in the future, but also meaningful for generations in the future? Will my children see me practicing these habits and therefore ameliorate some of these conditions later on? You know, will I get to see the next 20, 30, 50 years if I make these small decisions today? And that's a really burdensome and challenging cross to bear for a lot of people, specifically for Black families and Black individuals, because there's so much that we're dealing with already.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. And I also was very thoughtful around heart disease because I know the statistics from the Journal of American Medicine, JAMA anyway, I can't remember
Hmm.
how the acronym works. And I saw the statistic maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Everything is skewed with with the pandemic. Was it 2 years ago? Was it 4 years ago? Who knows? Um, where they had looked at the statistics of women who get heart disease in America, and the statistics for Black women or women of African descent was much higher, and much higher by quite a bit. And that shook me because it was just around the time of the new year where you get all the worst statistics and people are waving their fingers at you saying, you know,
Yep.
this is your fault, this is your problem, let's get it fixed. And what really bothered me is I reached out to a friend of mine who's an epidemiologist, and him and I had this conversation that, you know, the increase in heart disease in African American populations isn't solely the fault of people of African descent. There are a lot of things that play in the ability to get access to healthcare, the amount of stress that people of color, and particularly Black people, walk through the world with on a daily basis. Like we talk
Hmm.
about things like post traumatic stress disorder. Um, the things that Black folks and people of color in a white supremacist society encounter every single day is not post-traumatic stress, it's ongoing traumatic stress. uh,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Microaggressions or macroaggressions or hypervigilance, or, you know, or just, you know, running into somebody who feels the need to police your body in some kind of way. And you can't tell me that doesn't contribute, that added stress of walking through the world in this identity, in a racialized identity, does not add to the stress that would increase our our incidence of heart disease. Yet we are solely blamed for correcting
Hmm.
that problem. It's a systemic problem, in my opinion, if it affects 60 to 80% of the of people of African descent. It's not a coincidence, and it can't only be our diet, and it can't only be, you know, our individual problem. This has to be systemic. And I get really annoyed at the idea that the health and wellness industry likes to point the finger back at us, claiming that we're not doing the right things when A, we might not have access, or B, we live in
Hmm.
such a stressed out existence that even if we were doing all the things, it's not necessarily going to change our outcome.
You're absolutely right. But I think, you know, there's a word there that needs to be kind of amplified and highlighted: industry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is way more profitable and beneficial for individuals of African descent, Black individuals, Black women, to take individual responsibility for their health concerns, chronic concerns that may be exacerbated by current trauma, racial trauma, ongoing microaggressive behavior, just living in a world where you're constantly needing to justify your existence and to prove your value. It's way more profitable to be the individual saying like, well, what can I do? What can I purchase? What can I buy? What can I consume to make this better? And so unbeknownst to all of us, we are participating in a
Mm,
system that directly benefits from us feeling like we don't do enough to
mm,
make sure that we are well.
mhm,
And one thing that I would say to anyone listening is that, if this is blowing your mind, or, you're beginning to unlearn some of these practices, take a deep breath and recognize that, it is not your individual responsibility to change the world. It's not your
mm,
fault, but as
mhm,
DBT says, it is our problem. And
mm,
so finding ways to show up for your community, finding ways to spread awareness, finding ways to talk about and make small changes outside of things that you need to purchase or to consume or to engage with in an industry sense, in the health and wellness industry sense, because health and wellness begins where you are and it
mm.
begins in the mind, is a really empowering act, right?
Wow.
Can we be creative about how we do that?
Absolutely. And absolutely. And I love what you said around it's not our responsibility. Like we pick up especially Black women, we have been trained to pick up the mantle of the world, right? We have been
Mhm.
trained to look after everybody all the time. And it's ingrained from us from the time of enslavement, where we were looking after children, where we were looking after, households or whatever. And a friend of mine said something really interesting. Teresa Thames, she's a pastor, I believe, and she said on a video clip that I shared on my page a while ago, for a lot of us, our worth is in our work. And so we
Mm,
constantly pick up the work because that's where we get our worth. And that's something that we've been trained to do, right? That our worth is in our work. And I think it really dovetails nicely with what you said, um, around this idea of constantly, being responsible for our communities. That's kind of the mantle of the Black woman that we're here and that we're strong. And quite frankly, I'm tired of it. Like you can keep your resilience, you can keep your strong Black woman trope, because it doesn't allow for us to be soft or vulnerable or ask for help. And I think that's problematic in seeking well-being as an individual, if you're always expected to be the strong one, the one that speaks up, the one that saves everybody, because that's how we've been trained.
I completely agree.
Mm,
I
it's
completely agree.
it's a tough one. So I want to just pivot a little bit here. I want you to tell me how you got involved in the work that you're involved in. Like what brought you to the path of being a counselor, a psychotherapist? Like I so very rarely see Black women, Black men, people of color within this modality. Like when I found out that not only you're a Black woman, but we're from the same place, right? From Barbados. I was like, finally, I'm going to get to talk to a counselor who's going to understand my culture, and
Right.
it's going to understand what's not going to fly, because my entire life I've always had either a white woman or a white man be my therapist. So how did you come to do this work, and do you see this industry changing at all?
That's a great question. I came into this work by true honest experience. you know um I grew up in Barbados and I lived there until I was about 16. I ended up moving away to finish high school on my own. And from there, I've just been traveling and going from visa to visa and and going from country to country, kind of hoping and praying that I'll find a place to settle. And I ended up returning back to Canada 2 years ago and finally getting my permanent residency. So I have a home now.
Yeah, a wanderer, right? You've
I'm
collected
not
yourself,
just a nomad living from visa to visa, hoping
right?
for the best.
Yeah.
But, growing up, I think most Caribbean people can really resonate. And most people too, right? Who have maybe experienced invalidating family structures and family environments, um, can relate to feeling really unheard and
Mm,
feeling like,
yeah.
your feelings don't have a space. There's not a lot of room for who you truly are. And I was a weird kid. I was super, super weird.
I love that.
And
You see me smile. I love that you were.
I
Where did
was
the
super
two
weird.
eyes?
I mean, I was into I was kind of a goth, like a little bit of a scene kid. I wore like black lipstick at times. It was just like
Wow.
very counter to the lifestyle and the way of living in Barbados. It's very beachy, sunny.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of like, you
Happy all
know,
the time. Yeah.
happy, like it's very chill. And here I am, wearing Converse and like straightening my bangs. So I think, I had I laugh now, but it was really painful childhood.
Mm.
And my parents gave me everything that they possibly could. I couldn't have asked for more. But there was a lot of pain and I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. So I remember this very, very clearly. I think I was sitting at my desk in my childhood bedroom and I wrote down in a journal, I don't want anybody else to feel like this.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I didn't have access to therapy at the time, but I knew from television and I knew from media that there were, at the time, I was like, white ladies that do
Yeah.
these things. And I don't think I had the mindfulness as a teenager then to say, like, oh, I'm not able to do it. I kind of just naively said that's what I want to do. Like, I want to help people, I want to help kids. So I originally wanted to be a child psychologist, but I ended up kind of turning to psychology and turning to psychotherapy as a tool to understand my own past. And then ultimately, once I had begun my journey of healing and learning, and I'm still on this journey, right? It's ongoing.
Mm.
Um, I really started to divert my attention into uplifting the community and making space for others to do that healing and growing work. And, the second part of your question is, do I see this field changing? And yes, I do. I think even just in the past 2 years, right? I've seen it really explode. When I started my private practice, I was one of the very few on Psychology Today that were Black, and I'm an eating disorder trained therapist. So I still don't know of a single other eating disorder trained Black therapist, Black female therapist. And I get asked daily
Mm.
about this. And, you know, I knew the faces on those directories and those listings by heart. I went through hundreds of pages trying to find, other Black therapists to connect with. And I kind of knew who was out there. And there, I could count on two hands at the time who
Mm.
it was. And since the pandemic, I've really seen a lot of Black women empower themselves to leave, maybe the institutions and the hospitals and to get back into the community and to start, opening up shop and saying, hey, I'm here. It's safe.
Mm.
And here's a place that you can seek refuge, you can seek connection, and you can grow while not necessarily feeling like you have to educate, teach, or train your own therapist on how to show up for you and how to be the person that you need. And I think even just that is mind blowing and just so empowering for people to not have to do the work
Mhm.
to show someone else how they need to be cared for, how they need to be supported, and how they need to feel safe and what they need to feel safe.
I think that's amazing. I often question, everything is, I do everything in retrospect. I really credit my psychotherapist when I was in my early 20s and having a lot of difficulty for helping me like just assess my feelings and work through some stuff and give me some coping skills. But sometimes when I look back at conversations in my self study, in my reflection, whenever I do these things like slip back into my past, sometimes when I haven't resolved something and I think to myself, I slip back into that situation, handle it the way I want to handle it now so that I can like put it to bed and move on, right? Even if it's not happening in real life, I sometimes play these games. And sometimes I thought with a few of the people I had spoke with in my past that therapists who aren't culturally aware and haven't had any training sometimes teach us as people of color and as Black people how to just assimilate with white supremacy, like the things
Yep.
teaching you how to go along and get along. And I'm really over that. I'm hoping that the therapy world is shifting now, that we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at a homogeneous population that doesn't understand white supremacy and internalized oppression and all those things that we as Black folks and people of color take on in order to cope in a world, like you said, that constantly has us proving our humanity or begging for our humanity. And that sometimes therapy is just another tool of that oppression to teach you how to just manage that instead of
Mm-hmm.
trying to push back against it. And a couple of days ago, I had a really interesting conversation with, like, I call her my pseudo psychotherapist, Dr. Del Parker. Back in the day, I would I would be putting things up on my Facebook page that were really depressing or upsetting or whatever, and she would text me and go, I saw your Facebook today. Can you give me a call? I need to talk to you quickly. And I'd be like,
Sounds like a therapist.
I just saw your page and I'm a little concerned. Can you give me a call when you get a minute? And it just having that voice. And she was one of the first people I ever saw that was a Black woman that was doing this work. So, I'm always curious as to why in the Black community, and you and I know in the West Indian community, there's a lot of resistance to seeking help around mental health issues. It's almost like a badge of shame. Often, and I'm going to share this, and I've told people before, so I know she's not going to hear the podcast, but this idea, like my mom had, that you just need to have like demons cast out of you, like you just
Mm-hmm.
need to find Jesus. I say find Jesus, and maybe Jesus will tell you to go to therapy. Like I just,
I hope
right?
you would.
Right? I think yeah, I'm here for you, but I'm also going to send you in the direction of somebody that you can talk to one-on-one, face-to-face all the time, just to give you some clarity. What's the resistance, you think?
I think you named it. It's shame,
Mm,
and it's also guilt, right?
yeah.
There's a lot of narratives wrapped into spirituality, even. You mentioned your mom having this sensibility and this belief that it really is just the demons needed to be cast out. And there's a lot of spiritual narratives that get really twisted on the need for suffering in order to seek salvation. And
Mm,
this idea that we need to labor before we can rest, that we need to work before we can slow down, and that we need to deserve spaces in which we feel seen, heard, and feel belonging in.
mm,
And I think for a lot of West Indians and a lot of Black folk, um, you know, we've been working our whole lives. And there's not a lot of space for self care. I remember I mentioned self care to my own family, and I think, my parents actually laughed. Like they were like,
that.
what is that? It literally, they said, like, what is that? Like, oh, okay, that's cute. Self-care, as if we have time for
For
that.
that, as if you deserve that. Keep it moving, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's not just shame around, oh, I'm feeling these things and I don't even know if there's a safe space for me to talk about it. I don't even know if there's someone who will be able to hold space for these things that I am so ashamed of, that I'm so worried about. But it's also
Mhm.
this guilt, who am I to deserve a safe place to talk about these things?
Mhm.
I haven't done enough. It's, always the next thing to do. And so I see that a lot in the people that I meet with for therapy. It's, internalized shame around what they're feeling, whether their relationship is, quote unquote, good, bad, or everything in between. Shame and guilt about not really loving the way that they were raised. I love my parents. I care so much about them, and why am I saying all these bad things
Yeah.
in
However,
therapy?
yeah,
I'm airing out family secrets
that's a
and
right. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
breaking cycles, and showing up in therapy as someone who wants to make changes in their lives. It's a requirement almost for you to lean into that shame and to see what questions that shame is asking you. What needs to be healed? What needs to be fixed? What needs to be eliminated? And when you can answer the questions that shame is poking and prodding you to hide and to conceal, you can start to address it with, here's this word again, intention. You can start to be purposeful about it and to allow yourself to feel without allowing these narratives around, I don't deserve this, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, this is useless, this is unhelpful, and really just asking yourself more questions about, like, what do I need? What would make the difference for me today? How do I feel safe in this moment? With whom do I feel safe with? And how do I nurture those connections and those relationships to make my life feel more meaningful for me in the moment?
Mm, that's great. That is great advice. That gives a sense of lightness. Like, I hope that those words encourage people who have been nervous. Like, what would you say to somebody, especially somebody who's feeling this trepidation around sharing family secrets? Because a lot of us are raised, myself in particular, what goes on in this house stays in this house. And, you don't kind of talk about it, kind of thing, kind of raised that way. What would you say to somebody who's like a little trepidatious about going to therapy, or, worried about sharing that part of their
Mhm.
vulnerable selves?
I think, I would direct them to, the fact that they have the words already. The words are in their mind. It's now you have to deal with, what do you think the consequences of
Mm.
you saying that out loud are?
Wow.
Do you think that you will stop tolerating things? Do you think that you will stop accepting things that are harmful for you when you speak that out loud? Sometimes people avoid therapy because they know that the change they seek is on the other side of that disclosure.
Mm,
And
yep.
they're afraid of the consequences of what that might mean for them. They're not ready for the conflict resolution or the discord that comes with setting boundaries and, making sure that your needs are met. That's really, really hard, especially when there are people in your family and your life who are really, really dedicated to making you feel bad for
Mm,
having those needs,
yeah.
and also kind of shaming you for setting those limits in the first place. And then the second and very, very important thing that I would say to someone is, your therapy and your relationship with your therapist is sacred. I
Mm,
treat that as a gift to be able to hold space and to recognize the scariness of what it means to be honest with someone about the things that you don't talk about with anybody at all. And there are regulations, there are laws, there are rules, there are, you know, things in place to protect you from those secrets ever leaving the sanctity of your therapist's office. And I think a lot of people are misinformed about therapy, or have had experience with unethical and harmful therapists who use their information in very problematic ways and don't respect the space that they hold with their clients. I'm not saying that's every therapist. I mean,
Right.
it's definitely not, but
Yeah.
they're definitely, not everyone comes into this profession with great intentions. And I think a lot of people who maybe tried something before, or said, last time I spoke to someone, or last time I even alluded to this, they belittled me, or they were condescending, or they told someone else. And I would just say, you have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And it is our responsibility as therapists to make sure that your health information is safe, secure, and is treated with the respect that it deserves.
Mm, I appreciate that. I am a wholeheartedly for everybody getting therapy. I'm a big fan of it being part of our national healthcare system, and in Canada it is. And if you're lucky enough to have an employer that has like extended benefits, you can often, have coverage that way. But it really should be something that is accessible to most of us or all of us. And I think removing that stigma of going to therapy and the continuing of the culture to talk about mental health in the
Mm-hmm.
same way we talk about physical health is really important, because I don't think we would be having these same kind of conversations like 10 years ago. And I shared the story with you in our therapy when I was 16 years old, and I've shared this story on Instagram. I had given up on life and had tried to end my life at 16. And my parents, prior to that happening, I asked my parents if I could go talk to somebody because I was feeling heavy and I was feeling scared and
Mm-hmm.
things. And my mother, who had been a nurse at the time for like 25 years, gave me the speech about how therapists are just as messed up as you and they can't help you anyway. And you're not going to bring shame on this family by going to therapy, which seems like a really bizarre, this is the 80s though, a
Mm-hmm.
really bizarre idea, right? This is, the 80s, yeah, the late 80s, I would say. This is a really, we're not going to tolerate this. You don't get to go. And then it resulted in me, having a very serious event. And
Mm-hmm.
then them being angry about me having this event. Had they had given me the opportunity to go to therapy, I'm pretty sure the event wouldn't have happened. But even after I tried to kill myself and was unsuccessful, my parents still wouldn't let me go to therapy. And my mother was mortified because she was a nurse and I was taken to the emergency room of the hospital that she works at, right? So it was going to inevitably trickle back to
Right.
her coworkers, and then she was going to be, either the object of ridicule or the object of pity, and neither of those things did she want. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
if you if you care about the well-being of your child, none of these things should matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
So
said this to you when you shared this with me then, and I'm going to say it again now. I'm glad you're here.
oh, thank you. So am I. So am I. So am I. I'm grateful that I wasn't successful because clearly I had some things to do and clearly I had some life to live. And
That's right.
right. So I had some stuff to do. I had some life to live, and it's been really great. And I've been like hypersensitive around my children, given that my oldest son is now at the same age I was when I had this episode. And I know he's, the pandemic has made everybody's life harder. And he's not getting to have the quintessential, high school
Mm-hmm.
experience. His whole high school has been sitting at his desk in his room for the most part. And only very recently, because my kids are both vaccinated now, have they been going out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Prior, I was letting them hang out with their friends here and there because I thought their mental health is important. And seeing your friends on screen isn't the same as kicking a soccer ball or playing basketball on the court or,
Right.
riding your bike around the neighborhood. It's not the same. So I was like, I'm okay with your friends coming over if their parents are okay. And we'll just make sure your friends are in our bubble. Like we'll choose
Mm-hmm.
what our bubble is and we'll just make sure they're all being really mindful. And I had a really big heart to heart with my son a couple of weeks ago when he was feeling a little blue. And I said to him, I want you to know that I am always on your side no matter what. And I brought up, if you're feeling bad, you can go talk to somebody. Dad has gone to talk to somebody. I've gone to talk to somebody. Aunt Judy talks to somebody, Uncle Sean. We've all really embraced talking to people, and they're, if you feel you need to. And he had no idea what it was. Like, he's like, what does that mean? I go, like, if you don't want to talk to Dad and I, and you want to go and be really honest with somebody else, and you can lay it on the line. And I know as your mom, I'm far from perfect in this mothering thing. And you don't have to feel bad about throwing me under the bus, because I kind of expect it. Like, nobody can be perfect, right? I figure everybody's kid's going to go to therapy and complain about their parents, because I just think that's the way it's going to be. And I'm okay with that. As long as you're out there telling your therapist whatever you need to tell them. And if I'm, when I'm 60 or 70, you come back and tell me that time you didn't let me do that thing, I'm okay. I'm here for it. I'm ready for it. I'm grounded in it. And I will apologize and do the things that I need to do, because I want you to have the absolute opposite experience of what I had. And I always tell my sons, even if I'm angry at you, even if we don't agree on something, I am always on your side. I am not the enemy. I am always here for you. And there's nothing you can say or do that's going to make me love you any less. And if you need help, you just tell me, because this is my job. I want to do it for you. So I'm hoping that line of communication is really open. And the same way you wrote in your diary and said, I never want anybody to feel this way, I feel the exact same way about my sons. I want to be that open parent that makes them feel like, okay, I can go to therapy, call my mom a bitch or whatever, and that's okay. Like, I'm down. I understand how you're feeling. Okay, right? You know what I mean? And that, like I said to him, we're not always going to agree. We're not always going to get along, but I'm always on your side no matter what. So.
What an exhale for them to have that unconditional support from you.
Always. Like you said, I want to break the cycle. I want to talk about your evolution in the psychotherapy world, because you have your own practice.
I do.
Yes, which I think, you all are going to get to see like a little glimpse of Meghan. And if she feels comfortable sharing her Instagram later, we'll share that. You can kind of see the work that she's doing. You are a very mature old soul, because when I talk to you, I think I'm talking to somebody my own age, but quite frankly, Meghan is young enough to be my daughter. So, true story. Supposed to say, let's just call it.
Guilty.
Let's just call it. But I feel like you lived a long time, and you've had this really incredible experience that you can draw on, and that parallels my life so well. But you have like done a wonderful thing having this practice, and I want to know what inspired you to have a practice. I don't see a lot of Black women in leadership roles within the industry that you're in, and you just kind of stepped into it. I'd like to hear a little bit about how that came to be.
Well, it's a bit of a journey, and I think I talk about this in an article that I just wrote for my blog, A Therapist Perspective, and in it I kind of detail a little bit of my journey and how, when I first started in this work, there was no training on how to be in the community as a leader working directly with clients. We were trained to work within institutions. We were trained to work within treatment centers. And there were interdisciplinary teams. There was due diligence. There was process. There was all of this kind of bureaucracy and rigmarole that really prevented me, in my perspective, in my opinion, from doing work that I wanted to do with clients. And it's even worse in public health agencies, but it's a little bit better in private institutions. I ended up working at a private rehab here in Toronto, and ended up developing and designing their mood and anxiety program in a matter of months. And I know that is nothing that I could have done with within working the Ontario government or a Toronto community agency program. No shade to anyone who is working there. They're doing such necessary work. It's just the wait lists are so long, and the capacity to change and evolve with the changing and evolving society is just not there. We're not able to be as reflexive to the work and to the needs of a growing population, and to a population that's becoming more aware and more demanding of competent and culturally sensitive mental health services. So that was kind of, my background. And I kind of really, I left my job. I wasn't feeling very good about that job. I left it and I was feeling quite low. And, I didn't have a plan. I did not have a plan. I just kind of quit my job. I talked to my husband and I said, hey, I need to leave. I gotta go.
Yeah.
And he's a gem, that man. He really just said to me, it doesn't really matter how hard it's going to be for us. Do what you need to do and we'll figure it out after. And so I quit my job and I decided I would figure it out. So I started private practice and I hoped for the best. Maybe, I'd get 1 or 2 clients. I could call up some old friends and, say at the time I thought, I'm just going to get people who graduate from the treatment program that I was just working at and continue their work in the community. That was not the case. I got so busy so fast.
That's amazing. Because that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And I put up my Psychology Today and I think I just closed my phone and my laptop and I went to bed. Like, I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, I spent time writing a little bio. I made a little Squarespace website and I was like, this is cute. Like, look at Meg. Ooh. And so I woke up the next day to so many emails, and then the next day after that, and then the day after that, and I was full. I started my private practice September of 2019 and I was full by end of October.
What? So much need.
Yes. It was crazy how intense everything happened. So I really didn't accept very many clients. I can tell you right now, there are some clients, most of the clients that I see now in 2021 are the same clients that I started seeing in
2019.
Fall of 2019. And and everyone keeps asking me, when are you going to accept new clients? When are you going to do this? I was like, I swear to God, if I had the time and the space and the day to do it, I really would, because I would work 10-hour days. Right. I would see, 8, 9, 10 people a day. And, every hour in therapy is really dedicated to leaning into that person's experience. There's no time to multitask or to do other things during the hour. So I was spending 8, 7, 9, 10 hours every day locked into other people's experiences. By the time January 2020 came about, I was burnt out. And I was so overwhelmed that I started to really pull back. I said, okay, I've got to see less people a day. I've got to really just really slow down in order to be effective and to be a better therapist. And so that conversation I had with myself really led me to thinking, there's not enough of me. What can I do to expand my services? And so I started working with my wonderful supervisor, Dr. Stevenson. He is a proud Cuban psychologist and is the first supervisor I've ever had that identifies as like Latinx or BIPOC. And, he's wonderful. I call him a friend now. And we just started dreaming up ways to serve the community better. And that's how Bloom was born in August of 2020, in the depth of the pandemic. I went for it. And here we are.
How many practitioners do you have working with you?
We have 9 practitioners working with us now. Yeah, I know.
This makes me so happy. And these counselors, these therapists, these practitioners, these clinicians, are they all folks of color?
I think we have one person who doesn't identify as a person of color, but 8 out of 9
That's unheard
are
of. This is
the
unheard of.
all female, all women identified. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge um, privilege and biases and ways that people show up. Psychology and psychotherapy is a completely female dominated profession, which makes sense why most of us would be female identifying. But I think there's room for non-binary therapists, there's room for male therapists, there's room for people to really show up and to be their full selves and to support the community that needs them. And so there's 9 of us, all women of color, myself included, 3 Black women, South Asian women, Aboriginal, First Nations, biracial women. I'm proud of the community that I've built. I'm proud.
Look at what you've done. This is like unheard of. I'm willing to bet that you are one of the only in North America, because I've never heard like the cross section of representation here. I can't wait to see non-binary therapists. I
Me
can't wait.
too.
Like this is that community is so underserved in terms of this community, underestimated historically. The new phrase is now historically excluded.
Yep.
I'm here for it. It needs to expand. We all need to have a place where we can feel safe to share our experiences and not have our experiences be, colored by or influenced by white supremacy, but to have the experience be authentic to who we are, and, to not have it be influenced by gender norms and all the things that
Mm-hmm.
hard for us to be who we are. And almost like therapy is putting you back into the lane where the rest of the world wants you. Whereas now, when you have a therapist that looks like you, can identify with your lived experience, it makes you feel so free. Like I've had 3 or 4 therapists, and with the exception of Dr. Gail and yourself, I've never felt like I can be 100% honest or 100% myself.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think when I come to therapy with you, I'm just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. I just feel like
And I'm like, okay, let's take a breath.
I tell you everything. I've never done that.
Well, it's powerful.
Yeah.
I'm super honored to hold that space. And before I moved back to Canada, I was working at, I think it's one of the top 3 largest LGBTQIA plus health centers in the world, Fenway Health. I was living in Boston.
Wow.
And I was working there, and I was running groups and getting to learn. I ran an exploring sexuality group, and I mostly work with youth, trans and gender nonconforming youth, and supporting them through their gender affirmation surgery, through navigating family conflict. A lot of them were homeless, and we're really struggling to find safety, some as young as 12.
Wow.
And my work with them really kind of pushed me into this landscape where, one, I wanted to meet the needs of people that didn't feel like they had a space to feel heard. Something that people might not know about me is that I'm queer. Like, I'm a bisexual Black woman therapist. I mean, I'm straight passing because I have a husband.
Right.
Don't know how that happened. If he listens to this, he'll probably laugh. But I think, there's just so much, there's like a hidden curriculum for therapists who don't experience being historically excluded, who don't experience marginalization, who don't experience a lack of belonging and a distrust in systems, to learn about how to support clients of color, how to support clients who exist in different sexual and gender identities and orientations. And I think it's important, even if you exist in those margins, to continue learning.
Yeah.
I consider it a deep honor to continue sharpening my craft
Mm,
and showing up for people in a way that they they feel respected and heard.
mm,
And so I really admire what you're doing, really using your voice to show people that therapy is not as terrifying as they may think it is, and that if you are, able to and have the capacity to search, because there's a lot of us out there now, so now you've got to do the work to search to see
all of
who's
it.
the right fit.
Yeah.
um, Once you're committed to that journey and you find someone that you feel safe with, to kind of just let yourself exhale, let
Yeah.
yourself exist, feel, do what you need to do, and we're with you in lockstep.
It's an incredible, empowering, and dare I say, intentional feeling when you connect with that person who is seeing you and hearing you and allowing you to be yourself and can completely see you for the multi-dimensional person you are and has a similar lived experience so they can actually hear you without you saying, well, you won't understand, or what's the point of bringing this up? They're just not going to get what I'm saying. Because, as Black people, we will never know what it is to be white. And as white people, they'll never know what it means to be Black. So there's in some spaces it's really necessary to connect with somebody who can attest to your lived experience, which I love. So as we begin to wrap, I can't believe we've been talking for almost an hour. I want to always ask people at the end of the podcast, what do you do for your own personal well-being? And what are some tips you could give our listeners about tapping into their own personal well-being, that feeling of well-being, if you will?
What do I do? Well, one thing that I really I can't stress enough is I just let myself feel what I'm feeling and
Mm,
try not to judge it, try not to shape it or to shrink myself in any way. If you wake up in a bad mood, I will literally say out loud, I'm in a bad mood. I'm
right.
not feeling good.
Yeah.
And really allowing myself the space to announce and to name what I'm feeling has been so empowering for me, because I think as a Black woman, I've had to perform regulation a lot. I've had to perform feeling well, and sometimes I'm not. So I want to be honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing that I do is really just boundaries, limits.
Struggle.
uh,
Struggle.
it's a constant struggle. And, boundaries is such a huge topic. That would be a totally different podcast. But
Totally. I'll
I
have you
really
back.
set boundaries with myself. I
Mhm.
set boundaries with my loved ones. I set boundaries with my dog. I set boundaries around my time, my energy, my interest, and I'm always working at it.
Mhm.
But I think it's one of the things that really clears space for me to do what I love and to do what matters to me. And so those are my two personal wellness tips, other than the basic activities of daily living, like making sure that I get a shower, that I stay hydrated, that I try to have at least one or two nutritional meals a day, the things that keep the engine full.
Yes. Keep us moving forward.
um,
Yeah.
but for people who are really starting this wellness journey, I think a few things that you can maybe start to do is to start to record and to describe what is it that you're experiencing. Tell your story.
Mm.
um, I think it's really powerful. Not in, you don't have to think of it as a huge exercise, as, oh gosh, I've got to now sit down and write a memoir or biography. I have some clients that prepare PowerPoint presentations before we
Wow.
meet to say, there's a lot that you need to get caught up on. Here's a deck.
Wow.
you know, that kind of energy is admirable, but not necessary always,
Right.
right? And so I would say, jot down on your calendar in your daily diary, or even just on your family calendar, like a smiley face or a sad face or just a mood, a feeling, something to record how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. Because the thing that you will need most to understand what is important for your wellness journey is data. You
Mm,
need to know when you're not feeling great, what patterns, what leads to that, what affects it, what things make it better. Your therapist might ask you questions. Well, what makes you feel good? Or when do you feel like this? Or, how often have you been experiencing why? And a lot of people are like, well, I'm not sure. I just avoid all of these things because I don't want to have to deal with it. And so addressing the avoidance, really starting to record, just even in small ways, what you're experiencing, describing what you're feeling, and keeping a bit of an archive of that is going to be useful data that you can use to improve your habits, to change your boundaries, to, set some clear guidelines for yourself that are not just aspirational, but realistic. It's based in what you've actually done and what really matters to you. And then, another thing I would truly recommend is this is going to be a hard one, but
we're made to do hard things. We can do
accept that your ways of thinking about yourself are rooted in the beliefs and the doctrines and the um, ideologies of being unwell.
it. Wow.
And
That's
when you accept that, you will start to settle into this idea that it is a journey and start to manage your expectations about what it might be like for you to start shaping and changing and evolving and growing into who you want to be.
mm,
So many people I see come to therapy and they're like, okay, so we're going to do 10 sessions. And then, I'm not going to feel depressed anymore. And then I'm going to feel this and I'm going to feel that. And they have just such high expectations for themselves that are rooted in these ideas of being unwell. It's rooted in these productivity mindsets. It's rooted in not resting. It's rooted in not feeling. It's rooted in this, performance mindset. I've got to show out and show up as opposed to be me and to stay in the moment. And so I think, even just accepting that, learning to be compassionate and turning towards that mindset with a little bit of gentleness,
mm,
a little bit of understanding will give you a lot of cognitive and mental room to start thinking about this journey with more kindness, with more realistic expectation. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Slowing down doesn't mean that you won't get there. It
mm.
just means that it's going to take a little bit longer, and that's okay.
That is okay. I love that. These are all great tips for us to set a course and chart a course for our own well being. This has been an absolute amazing hour. And I want to thank you again for being my inaugural podcast, the first time I've done a podcast all by my lonesome, all by myself.
My
And
pleasure.
it was amazing to speak with you. And in the show notes, I'll be adding your blog, your IG if people want to follow you on Instagram. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know about you or where they can find you?
Yeah, I am the resident therapist for Alchemy Health, which is a new mental health platform with on-demand wellness courses and meditations for the culture. Um, I think it's one of those things where you go on Headspace and Calm and things like that, and you're trying to find your wellness routine, and it's not really designed for us by us. And so it's a huge part of my daily life now, and I'm so proud of it. And I would encourage everyone, if they're curious, to check out Alchemy and at alchemyhealth.com, or their Instagram, which is just Alchemy Health, ALKEME.
All right. I will link to that in the show notes and I will share that with everybody in the world because I think that's a great resource to have. Once again, Meg Watson, thank you so much for sharing your time and your perspective with me. This has been a wonderful experience. Thank you for being here on the Intentional Wellbeing Podcast. And we're going to keep continuing to work together so that we can all take care of ourselves and find the path to well-being. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.